کنفرانس حمایت از یک ایران آزاد در کنگره آمریکا با حضور نمایندگان هر دو حزب جمهوری‌خواه و دموکرات. واشنگتن 14 دسامبر 2017. محکومیت اعدامها، سرکوب وحشیانه و نقض حقوق بشر، صدور تروریست و برنامه موشکی فاشیسم مذهبی حاکم بر ایران. در کنگره آمریکا کنفرانسی با شرکت نمایندگان برجسته مجلس نمایندگان از هر دو حزب و ایروین کاتلر وزیر پیشین دادگستری کانادا تحت عنوان حمایت از یک ایران آزاد برگزار شد. در این جلسه که سازمان جوامع ایرانیان مقیم آمریکا با آن فراخوان داده بودند، تعداد کثیری از مشاوران نمایندگان کمیته خارجی، امنیت ملی، قوای مسلح و بودجه و تنظیم مالی و همچنین دیپلمات‌های کشورهای منطقه شرکت داشتند. الیوت انگل رئیس دموکرات‌ها در کمیته خارجی مجلس نمایندگان طی پیامی در حمایت از کنفرانس حمایت از یک ایران آزاد گفت:
The Iranian government is the major supporter of terrorism around the world. In fact, Iran is unfortunately the number one state sponsor of terrorism. And the money that they've gotten from the agreements that were signed gives them even more money, in my opinion. The people of Iran deserve better. Monies in Iran should be spent for the betterment of the Iranian people, not to be given to proxy terrorist groups all around the Middle East. In Syria, Assad is a brutal dictator who has murdered hundreds of thousands of his own people. And several times during the course of the war, the many years of the war, it looked as if Assad was beginning to lose the war. At that time, the Iranian government let go, let Hezbollah go and fight on the side of Assad, basically keeping Assad in power at the expense of the misery of the Syrian people. So I'm here to tell everybody that the United States Congress is watching very carefully and closely, and we're not going to stop until the Iranian people are absolutely free. The Iranian people deserve a free country, deserve to be able to choose their own leaders, and deserve not to be strangled by an oppressive leadership, an oppressive dictatorship, which only makes their lives worse. In my estimation, Iranian people today are asking why isn't money being spent in Iran to help create jobs, to help make a lot of the people better, to help so many young people who can't get jobs. Why is money being used to fund terrorist groups in other countries? And so I want the Iranian people to know that the American people stand with them and support them in their quest for freedom and justice. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, my name is Dr. Zahra Sadekpour, the Congressional Liaison for the Organization of Iranian American Community, as you know it as OIAC. Welcome to our last event of a series of U.S. policy in Iran, the way forward. There is a growing demand for change that has taken a new momentum in Iran. Over the last few weeks, thousands of Iranian workers, teachers, and other government pensioners from across Iran have held protest rallies outside the regime's parliament. They were chanting, "Free all political prisoners, free all imprisoned teachers." Anti-corruption protests, including on October 23rd, the rally outside the Iranian parliament witnessed to such demonstration as the people hold the Revolutionary Guards and the institutions associated with the Supreme Leader responsible for plundering of their wealth and property. What is the solution for Iran's problem? The answer is a secular, organized coalition. Recently, the President of the United States said that it is the Iranian people that the regime fears most. That is certainly true. Feared most by the Iranian regime is the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, a resilient movement that has endured and thrived over the last 4 decades and represents a large coalition for change and represents the popular sentiments of the Iranian people. Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, in a 10-point plan, has called for religious tolerance, separation of church and state, gender equality, support for Universal Declaration of Human Rights, freedom for all, a non-nuclear republic form of government, and coexistence and peace with neighbors based on UN charters. NCRI's clear platform is not only known and supported by the Iranian people, the Iranian American community, but also supported by the regional leaders in the Middle East, elected officials in Europe, and bipartisan members of US Congress.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for letting me come by and say a few words. And that's why it is important that you are here, and I want to thank you for being here. I also want to tell you this, that myself and other members of Congress are in this struggle for freedom of Iran indefinitely, that we are in this together, that we are not going to waver, even though the Iranian government, the IRGC, a terrorist organization, want us to give up. We're not going to give up. We're not going to quit in the support of a free and secular Iran. We will not give up even though the mullahs want us to give up, even though the government of Iran continues to murder its own people. Thousands and thousands of people are arrested because they disagree with the government on political matters or religious matters, and they're off to jail or they're hung in the public square. The world is watching what takes place in Iran, and what is taking place is not good, except the spirit of the people of Iran who want to be free, and the spirit of you folks from all over the world who want to make sure that your homeland is a free and secular nation, and that the mullahs be held accountable for all of the crimes that they have committed, not only in Iran, but all over the world. Anytime you see something bad going on in the world, somewhere in that situation is the IRGC or the Iranian government or their proxies of terrorist proxies causing that mischief, whether it's in the Middle East or other places. We are watching. The mullahs will be held accountable, and I want to assure you that we will together someday, hopefully very soon, march through the streets of Tehran arm in arm, congratulating Iran on being a free and independent democracy where the people rule rather than the mullahs rule. And that's just the way it is. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What we've seen in Iran since we signed this weak nuclear deal, this dangerous nuclear deal, the situation in Iran has actually gotten worse. When you look at the human rights situation, it has deteriorated under the so-called reformer Rouhani. Executions have increased at a staggering rate. Political activists, they are rounded up, they are detained. Ethnic and religious minorities are persecuted. They're arrested, they're tortured, or worse. And of course, Iran continues to spread its malign activities all across the region, disrupting the fragile stability in the Middle East. Iran's support for terror has increased and it has spread across the globe, but we are ever hopeful that the president has signaled that the old policies, as they are called, they are old and they're outdated and they are out. And he is ready to take Iran head on. Congress passed a series of sanctions bill. I'm sure that you've been looking at it. Last night we passed one. Just this morning, not even half an hour ago, we passed another sanctions legislation. And it's thanks to each and every one of you. And the United States has shown time and time again that we are standing firm on the side of the Iranian people and not of the regime. Let us be joyful that perhaps this is when freedom comes to Iran, when democracy comes to Iran. And thanks to your efforts, I know that together we can and we will. We will make that change that we need, that we will make progress toward a free Iran, free of ruthless dictators, free of supreme leaders who want to dictate to the people of Iran what they want. We want a real democracy. Muchísimas gracias y que pasen una Navidad muy gloriosa. Gracias.
38 years going into the 39th year of oppression. 2 generations of brilliant young people stymied in a room full of amazing, accomplished, professional people, not just here, but in Paris, where we broke 100,000 on site with millions watching worldwide. And that sort of human capital should never be squandered. The loss of freedom for people such as yourselves is a tragedy not for the Persian people, not for the Iranian people, but for the world. And I won't tolerate it. No longer can we appease those who would stifle basic fundamental human rights. It is time to stand strong. One of the most shameful moments in my adult life as an American not elected to any office at the time was to watch the Green Revolution as the United States stood silently, not even lending moral support, as young and old Iranians took to the streets to assert their basic human rights of self-determination. That should never happen again. Under this administration, I don't think that will happen, but I promise it won't happen with me. It is time to speak clearly, time to speak succinctly. We do not seek war. We seek basic human rights. And so I will say it again, and I will say it to any nation in the world with whom there is business conducted between themselves and the IRGC, the long pole in the tent that holds up this murderous regime. It is time to make a decision. You can do business with the IRGC and undergird the regime. You can fund the bloodshed that literally spreads in the form of the Quds and the IRGC and Hezbollah from Australia to Argentina, from Lebanon to Germany, and from Tehran to New York City. You can do business with those people, but if you do, and I can find out about it, you will not, if I can control it, do business with the United States. It is that simple. It is that hard a commitment that I have, that I call on my colleagues to have, that I commend you for having. The Iranian people have a history of pride and strength and revolution. In 1906, in the 1950s, in 1979, and I say this to the regime today, the next revolution will be one where the people of Iran seek to assert control, and this time the United States will have their backs. I thank you for what you do. I wish you a Merry Christmas, and thank you all. Keep up the fight.
Thank you, Zaraf. It's a pleasure to be here today, and what I want to do is to take off on some of the things that were stated earlier. One of the things that Judge Poe mentioned was the word accountability. And I have written about accountability in an article on Newsmax. Who's going to be accountable? Well, the regime, those responsible, the Ayatollahs responsible for helping to slaughter the 30,000 political prisoners have to be brought before the UNHCR. I wrote another piece in which we talked about the particular resolution that has been voted on, SR Resolution 188, condemning the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the 1988 massacre of political prisoners. What do I see as the future? I see that the President Trump will continue to impose sanctions on groups like the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. So I'll close with one of my favorite chants that I gave in Albania. In that case, I said, Ma hame tirani hastim. Ma hame tirani hastim. So thank you very much for having me come here today to speak.
Here is we haven't given up in the struggle for freedom, and if there's any country in the world where the forces of evil are coming up against positive forces of people around the world who believe in freedom, it's in Iran, and we are on the side of those people in Iran who would ask for democracy and a freedom, and we are asking all the world to join them in getting rid of the mullah regime, which is a travesty to any kind of person that believes in individual freedom and in a more peaceful world. It's been my honor to work with the various, how about the National Council for Resistance in Iran, and I'll just say that those people who are struggling to get rid of the mullahs are doing a great service for all of humankind and doing a great service to the people of Iran, because what we have now is a small group of people who are condemning the people of Iran to a destiny they do not deserve, and they're doing it by brute force. So thus, that should be American policy, working with the groups that want to oppose the mullah regime in Iran. And what about the groups inside Iran that are part of this mullah gangster regime? We have to make sure that once we have designated these different units that are at work now, the Revolutionary Guard, now that we've got some of them designated as terrorist organizations, they need to be sanctioned and they need to be singled out, and those people involved in those organizations that have been designated as a terrorist organization, they should pay a penalty personally for being involved. The sanctions must go directly to those people involved in these type of acts that are crimes against humanity. So it's not just crimes against the people of Iran, it's crimes against humanity. And so today I'm very happy to join all of you, and we should be supporting the real Iran, which is the Iranian people who they themselves are the oppressed. So with that said, God bless us all. Let us hope that next year will be the year when the mullah regime will collapse of its own evil and disappear.
First of all, allow me to express my appreciation and that of all Iranians who their hearts beats for a free and democratic Iran, to the many distinguished members of Congress from both aisles, bipartisan, and that for years and years have stood by the Iranian people and their wish for a free and democratic Iran. As we gather here today, the situation in Iran is like a powder keg. Rampant corruption has permeated every facet of the ruling regime from the top to the bottom. The country's infrastructure is in tatters. Government corruption and mismanagement have brought the economy close to bankruptcy. A nationwide protest movement has been continuing for more than a year, and it's growing, by people whose assets have been plundered by the government-backed financial institution, as well as people in other sectors of the society. These protests have on numerous occasions turned into political protests against the regime in its entirety. Tehran's response has been only greater crackdown on Iranian people and executions, Just beginning of this year so far, more than 600 people have been executed. During the Rouhani's period, more than 3,200 people have been executed. These repressive measures, however, can no longer contain the simmering society and the Iranian people yearning for fundamental change in Iran. The regime's second means of survival is set up its intervention in the affairs of other countries in the region. Mrs. Maryam Rajavi in European Parliament mentioned the following steps should be taken regarding the terrorist dictatorship government of Iran. Hold the Iranian regime accountable for its crime against the Iranian people, and particularly make Iranian regime accountable for the massacre in 1988, which more than 30,000 people in a matter of couple of months have been massacred. Condition all trade and commercial relations with the Iranian regime based on ending executions in Iran. Demand immediate expulsion of IRGC and its proxies from Syria and all other countries in the region. Otherwise, they should face severe consequences. Demand immediate halt to the regime's ballistic missile program. Otherwise, impose sanctions on the regime's oil exports and access the international banking system. Failing to deal decisively with the religious fascism ruling Iran will impose a deadly war on the region and in the world. There is a democratic alternative to the mullah's regime, which believes in free elections, gender equality, separation of religion and state, equal rights for all religious and ethnic minorities, and a non-nuclear Iran. This alternative should be recognized and embraced as a force for change. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
What a pleasure it is to be with all of you again, the freedom-loving people of Iran. It is really a tragic irony that one of the greatest civilizations in the history of the world, a civilization that produced Cyrus the Great, should now be reduced to being under the subject of the petty tyrants and dictators currently holding Iran hostage. Rouhani and his band, their days are numbered. One very important thing has happened since we gathered here last year. An apologist for that regime has left the White House, and a staunch supporter of the people of Iran has entered the White House. There will be no more cash on cargo pallets being taken to the mullahs of Tehran. Instead, the people of Iran are seeing the Congress now act to interdict the theft of the assets of the people of Iran by this illegal regime. I am very confident that the days of Rouhani are numbered, and we will soon see the great civilization of Persia reborn with all of the respect for the freedom of the people, the equality under law that civilized societies abide, and that the great civilization of Persia once enjoyed. So I'm very glad to be here today. I want to salute all of you for everything you are doing in the cause of freedom. It is working. The world is rallying to the side of the people of Iran, and the days of this kleptocracy in Tehran are numbered. Thank you all very much.
Well, it's such an honor to be here at this great celebration for this Association of Iranian American Communities to celebrate this season, and also to celebrate the passage of legislation in the Financial Services Committee to be able to sanction and identify the assets of Iranian leaders who, in terms of their corruption, have been able to amass wealth outside their country and to identify those assets and to potentially seize those assets. So bless you on this extraordinary occasion, and thank you so much for all you do to help restore and bring freedom and democracy for the Iranian people. Thank you.
Because if there was one single issue that was the most compelling concern for me when I was a member of Parliament, was the whole issue of moving towards a free and democratic and human rights protecting Iran. And I want to say that as we meet, we are addressing really a five-fold Iranian threat. And when I speak of a five-fold Iranian threat, both the negotiation and the outcome of the nuclear agreement tended to both obscure, marginalize, and sanitize the other four threats after the nuclear. These other four threats, which we must always bear in mind, are one, the Iranian terrorist threat, where year after year Iran is identified as a leading global sponsor of international terrorism. The hegemonic threat, where increasingly Iran represents a threat to the entire Mideast region. But the worst is the massive domestic repression, which continues to find more and more expression every day, which includes where Iran executes more people per capita than any other country in the world, where Iran is engaged in wanton and systematic detention and torture, not only of dissidents, but the leaders of all parts of civil society in Iran. And so I always say that when we meet in Canada and we speak of Iran, we are speaking on behalf of the Iranian people. We seek to show solidarity with the Iranian people and with the struggle for human rights and freedom in Iran. And I want to close just by making reference to the fact that recently we have an Iran Accountability Week. I would suggest it here maybe to take place in the American Congress. Every year, and it's for 2 weeks, our Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Human Rights sponsors an Iran Accountability Week, and that we must mainstream the question of human rights in Iran throughout our governance and throughout our foreign policy, and that the issue in particular of the massacre 1988 of the 30,000 dissidents represents an ongoing culture of impunity, because none of those who engaged in it have been held to account. Worse, they have actually been rewarded, as Mustafa Pur Mahammadi becomes a Minister of Justice in Iran, even though he participated in the 1988 massacre and the like. So we have to combat that ongoing culture of impunity, sanction the major human rights violators, and in fact there's a connection between what I did earlier today and this, and that is the Global Justice for Sergei Magnitsky legislation, adopted here in the United States, adopted in October by unanimous vote in the Canadian Parliament, is intended to sanction major human rights violators from whatever country. We're not sanctioning countries. We're sanctioning major human rights violators who are engaged in extrajudicial executions, engaged in torture, engaged in massive domestic repression, exactly the kinds of things where the leadership in Iran have been engaged in and where the culture of impunity continues. So I join with you in common cause in the hope that in the pursuit of justice, we will combat the injustice. And in combating the injustice in Iran, we will be pursuing justice on behalf of not only the Iranian people, but humanity as a whole. Thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come, and thank you for my brothers and sisters. My words will be brief, but they will be out of respect for Iran and for Iranian Americans. And I think if we have anything to unify us around, it is to have us stand shoulder to shoulder on a free Iran and to join the people to demand a free Iran. We may have different views amongst us in this country, but that we will link arms, and those arms will be such a way that we can go back to a free Iran, and that we will condemn massacres, as I have done, and that we will acknowledge the wonderment of the Persian culture, as I have done. So let me finish my remarks in a calm manner as I am speaking today. I thought in this season I wanted to have the tone of peace and to ask you to never give up on this journey and this fight, for no one will ever be punished for fighting for freedom, democracy, and those who have been oppressed. Thank you for letting me be here, and blessings upon you all.
Please, for the picture with your sisters.